I've got a few friends who actually have challenged me with this where I work. I guess because we're so suspicious, right, in law enforcement about people who lie or people who con other people. Is it possible that the disciples were conned? That in fact what happened is somebody sat in as an imposter and played the role of Jesus, either before or after the crucifixion, so that in fact none of this actually occurred. There's no resurrection at all. It's just somebody like a double standing in for Jesus. Okay. Well, I think we could test that, right? Because con artists, we've learned this working in law enforcement, have to have a couple of things in place in order to pull off the con. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. But typically, con artists, number one, have to have the confidence of the people they are trying to deceive. That's why they're called con artists. So it would have to be somebody in the inner circle of Jesus who would know all the words of Jesus, all the history that Jesus had with the disciples, in order to fool those disciples, because they'd have to know more details than the disciples did. As a matter of fact, that's the second requirement. You can't con somebody unless you know more about the con than they do. You have to know more about this thing you're lying about than the people you're lying to. Well, if that's the case, you'd have to have somebody in the inner circle who knew and had the confidence of the disciples of Jesus and would have known Jesus better than the disciples themselves, because he's about to con them. Now think about that. So how is he conning them through the entire trial? Do we think that they mistook this con artist for Jesus prior to the execution? And if you're saying, well, no, he's just somebody afterwards. But think about this. I've had this challenge offered to me. Doesn't Jesus appear to be somewhat different looking after the resurrection? Right? Like not everyone recognizes him right away. That's the con artist. That's the guy who's the imposter standing in for Jesus. That's why they didn't recognize him so quickly. Really? So think about what this con artist is able to do. This guy is a masterful magician. Here's why I say that. He's able to appear in the room miraculously. He's able to work miracles. He's able to ascend into heaven. Here's the problem with the imposter theory. It turns out that the imposter, after the resurrection, seems to have all of the miraculous supernatural power that Jesus had. Really? Well, he's either a very good magician or it's Jesus himself, who in his resurrected body does appear somewhat different to his disciples. But it's not an imposter, because number one, there's nobody who would fit those requirements beforehand, and number two, there's no one who could do what Jesus did after he rose from the grave. That's why the imposter theory simply doesn't explain the resurrection.